Hello everyone, and welcome to our workshop today. I'm Karen Price, Co-Director of Family Support at the Vermont Family Network. All of our workshops, including the previous ones, are recorded and can be watched on our VFN YouTube channel. The link is on our website, which is vermontfamilynetwork.org. Everyone who registered for today's workshop will receive a follow-up email with a link to this recording and a PDF of the presentation with live links. Vermont Family Network has been serving families of children with special health needs and disabilities and the professionals who serve them for more than 30 years. We are the federally designated Parent Training and Information Center, the Family to Family Health Information Center, and the Vermont chapter of both Family Voices and Parent to Parent USA. VFN and High Ability and the Vermont Agency of Education are partners in transition initiatives, and we work together to get transition information out to families and professionals. The development of the VFN Transition to Adulthood Toolkit was developed through a grant from High Ability Vermont, and hard copies of the VFN publication, The Family Guide to Transition Services, was generously funded by the Agency of Education. We value and appreciate these collaborative partnerships to bring families the best information and resources to assist them in having meaningful participation in their youth transition plan and to promote better youth outcomes as they move towards adulthood. Today's workshop is being recorded and will be posted on our website and YouTube channel. So please keep that in mind as you share information about your situation. This session will also include live captions. If you want to turn them on, click on the three dots by More, then Captions, and then Show Caption. If you're comfortable, you are welcome to turn on your camera. You can ask questions using the chat box, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. We will save time at the end of the presentation to answer questions. Feel free to share information or links to resources that you found helpful in chat as well. We know that you can all learn a lot from each other. Today's workshop is The Journey from School to Employment and Independent Living. How can the Client Assistance Program, or CAP, help? I'm excited to introduce you to Sherrie Brunelle, who is a paralegal with Vermont Legal Aid's Disability Law Project, focusing primarily on advocating for children and youth with disabilities and their families navigating the special education or Section 504 systemic mazes. Since 2019, she has served as a Client Assistant Program, or CAP, advocate for youth and adults with disabilities needing support on their journey to employment. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Karen, for that introduction. As Karen indicated, I've been in the world of special education since the federal special education law was first enacted, and I am also the parent, grandparent, and great-grandparent of kids with disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, specific learning disabilities, and ADHD. So I walked the path that many families are walking today, and I value the opportunity to speak with you and to share with you ways in which I think the Client Assistance Program may be able to help. Next slide, please. Okay. As Karen indicated, I have been with the Client Assistance Program since about 2019, so 7 years or so. So let's talk a little bit about what the Client Assistance Program is. The Client Assistance Program, or CAP, is part of Vermont Legal Aid's Disability Law Project. We are not part of any state government or agency. The Client Assistance Program was authorized by the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and in its most recent reauthorization was titled the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. The Rehab Act of 1973 is the same law that gives us Section 504. In 1984, CAP was created to help people with disabilities get the services they need to get good jobs, be independent, more self-sufficient, and active participants in their communities. It's also a federally funded program and provided at no cost to the person with disability. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what CAP does. There are two core pieces of work that we do. We provide information to youth and adults with disabilities about the services and benefits available under the WIOA or Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. Title I is the part of the act that applies to employment. We also provide help to individuals who are applying for or receiving services from an agency or program funded under the WIOA. Next. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the programs that are funded by the WIOA. The first is Hireability Vermont, or HAVT. This is formerly called Voc Rehab. And then there's the Vermont Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or DVVI. That's the program, obviously, for people who are blind or have vision impairments. In some states, these two groups are all housed within one agency, but in Vermont, there are two separate divisions focusing on the general program is under Hireability, and the special program for people who are blind and visually impaired is under the DVVI division. Other organizations impacted by the WIOA are the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or VABVI. This is where the Teachers for the Blind come from. They also provide a lot of support to people in the community, making their homes accessible, helping learning, navigating community, and potentially public transport systems. So a day-to-day kind of thing. The Vermont Association for Business, Industry, and Rehabilitation, or VABER, is an organization that is designed to provide assistance for people seeking employment. They contract with Hireability Vermont to provide job coaching and job search and resource finding for participants in Hireability's programs. And finally is the Vermont Center for Independent Living. This is an organization in Vermont that is run by and focused on people with disabilities. It's very much a peer support kind of network. They offer a very significant range of services, including how to make home modifications to make homes accessible. But they also provide, relevant to this discussion, a lot of support and assistance around youth in transition, teaching self-advocacy skills and independent living kinds of resources, and helping people get connect with resources that might be helpful to them. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit more now about what we do in a little bit more detail. So we provide information about rights, services, and benefits available under the WIOA and Title I of the ADA. We explain how to get these services and help people navigate the application and eligibility process. We investigate complaints regarding staff or an agency. Anyone can contact us about a concern about a staff person or an agency, and we will certainly be responsive to that. We will not speak with anyone about a specific individual with a disability unless we have their permission. Agencies who we work with cannot bring us into a situation where they might be having some challenges working with a person with a disability. The person who has the disability is the only person that we represent and who can ask us to get involved. So we help people resolve problems as informally as we can with the staff or agencies. And when problems can't be resolved informally, we represent people in appeals of unfavorable decisions. We also help people advocate for services that they might need in order to reach their employment goal, or in other cases, an independent living goal. And we also engage in systemic advocacy to make access to services better. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for our help? Any person with a disability, age 14 or older. There's no end age. I've worked with some individuals who are in their 60s and 70s. The person must have a physical or mental disability, and they need to have assistance in order to access services from one of the entities funded under the WIOA. Next slide, please. Okay. So the important thing about CAP is that we're there to support people with disabilities to make informed choices. That's a legal term, and I'll explain that in the next slide. But choices relative to employment goals, services, and supports that are consistent with their individual strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, and interests. Again, these are terms that are all used in the WIOA. The focus is supposed to be on individualized planning and person-centered decision-making. Next slide, please. So what is informed choice? Informed choice means the individual is aware of all the information and options available regarding their services, including assessment and career exploration, employment goal and career advancement, services needed to achieve an employment goal, training and education opportunities, choice of service providers, and access to independent living services, I apologize. Again, the intent is that the person with a disability has choices and gets to select a choice that works best for them. Next slide, please. Under the WIOA, we have a mandate to solve problems in the least adversarial way possible at the lowest level. So we might engage in informal meetings with staff and or supervisors. We might help the individual negotiate a service or goal that they would like to have as part of their plan. We also can support individuals in mediation. Where informal resolution is not successful, the CAP advocate may represent the person at a hearing before the Vermont Human Services Board. The Vermont Human Services Board hears disputes relative to any entity that is part of the Vermont Agency of Human Services. Hireability and DBVI are both part of the Agency of Human Services. In some states, it's actually the Department of Labor or the Department of Education that is responsible for these entities. But in Vermont, it is the Agency of Human Services. So the HSB is where we go to resolve disputes that haven't been able to be resolved without some formal legal action. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about what CAP does on a systemic level. It's our goal and our focus to identify and challenge system-wide problems that make it hard for program applicants and participants to get services. For instance, when Hireability was reviewing its appeals chapter, we were able to comment on and successfully get changes in that policy to make sure that it was a clearer process and that all the requirements of the law were included in that process. Another example would be a chapter, a policy relative to casework services. And one of the things that we were able to identify as a problem is that people were not getting written notice of decisions made by the agency, and some of the letters were, including part of the information, but not other parts of the information. So we had a hand in establishing some form letters that are used, and we made sure that all the requirements for notice were included in those letters, and those letters are part of the hireability system now. And so when, for instance, a service is denied, a certain letter will go out and it will include notice of appeal rights. We also advise agencies and programs on changes in policies and procedures that will result in improved services for program participants. And we do that largely based from individual cases that we see or problems that we see in the course of our systemic work. CAP is a mandatory member of the State Rehabilitation Council required under the WIOA. Under the WIOA, each state must have an advisory council that is by majority, at least 51% participants are individuals with disabilities or family members of individuals with disabilities. The Client Assistance Program has a mandatory seat on that council. VFN has a mandatory seat on that council. There are other advocacy groups, business representatives, a full range of individuals who provide information, advice to hireability or to DBVI on how they are doing their job and what they might need to do better. We also review state plans and provide input on performance review reports that the agency conducts on a periodic basis. And finally, what we also do is we provide information to the community about programs and services available from the entities and our CAP services. So we have a number of handouts that we use. We often have an exhibit table at conferences like the VFN conference that's coming up soon. We will be there, and we try when we can to provide information on our website that would be helpful to people who are trying to navigate the various systems. Next slide, please. So let's talk about CAP and transition. Next. Just for review, I want to go over what the IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says about transition services. Transition services are defined as a coordinated set of activities for special education eligible students that focuses on improving academic and functional achievement to facilitate the student's movement from life as a student to life as an adult. And this includes post-secondary and vocational education opportunities, competitive integrated employment, adult services, independent living, community participation. Next slide, please. Under IDEA, transition plans and services are required by the age 16 for all students on an IEP, not students on a 504 plan. Although the required age is age 16, transition planning can, and I would advocate, should begin earlier at age 14. Transition plans are supposed to be based on the student's individual needs, strengths, preferences, and interests, and includes direct instruction, various types of related services, which might be physical therapy, occupational therapy, community experience, helping the student get out and navigate their community, and perhaps use public transportation in the limited places that's available in our state. There's also a focus on developing employment and other post-adult living objectives. For instance, does the person want to live on their own? Do they want to go to post-secondary education? Do they want to get a job? Are they going to stay at home with mom and dad? Those are all part of the transition planning process. Another key part is acquiring daily living skills where those are appropriate. And finally, functional vocational evaluations that might be helpful in helping the student identify what their vocational interests are. And it would also help identify what their strengths and challenges are. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about pre-employment transition services, often referred to as pre-ETS. These are the services that come from WIOA. So VR programs like Hireability must provide all students with disabilities, not just kids on IEPs, but all students with disabilities with 5 core services. They're job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling about comprehensive transition and or post-secondary education opportunities, workplace readiness training, training in self-advocacy and mentoring. In the years that I've been doing special education work, either personally or professionally, one of the key areas that kind of gets left on the sideline is self-advocacy. Kids with disabilities need to understand how their disabilities impact on them, and they also need to be able to speak up for themselves and tell people what they need. Another key component of pre-employment transition services is establishing some sort of a mentoring system, either hooking a kid up with a mentor or having that student become a mentor to another student. Next slide, please. So I want to look at the differences between the two. We've gone over each individually, but to summarize, IDA transition is mandatory for the schools and mandatory for the student. The focus is on life after school, whether it's education and training, employment, or independent living. Decisions about adult services get made in this process, and the school is responsible for paying for any of the services that are provided under the IDEA. Conversely, pre-ETs are mandatory for VR. Each state has to spend 15% of their federal allotment, on pre-employment transition services. However, the services are optional for the student. The focus is more on competitive integrated employment, which I'll comment about in a moment, education and training. It's not the pre-ET's focus to look at independent living. So decisions are going to be around the area of what's the student's ability to work and what supports are needed to have that student achieve their employment goals. And Hireability, or VR, is responsible for paying for all of these services. I wanted to talk a little bit about competitive integrated employment. There was a time in this state where people who had developmental disabilities were often moved into sheltered workshops. We've not had sheltered workshops in Vermont for many, many years now. Unfortunately, they still exist in other states. So competitive integrated employment means a job in the regular job market, working with other people of doing the same kind of work, getting the same kind of pay and compensation as a person without a disability. So it's not a segregated employment situation where people, for instance, are making less than minimum wage. And there's efforts to do away with the sheltered workshops under the WIOA, but there are other states that still continue to have these types of programs. Next slide, please. So the question becomes, how can we help with pre-employment transition services? CAP's role can be important in transition planning for the students with disabilities. We can explain the students' rights and responsibilities under the WIOA regulations governing pre-ETs. We provide information to parents, educators, and administrators around pre-employment transition services and other requirements of the WIOA. We also advocate for a student regarding their pre-employment transition services needs. So if a student and a family wanted to talk with us about what they can ask for as part of pre-employment transition services, we're happy to talk with them. And it may be hard for some folks to get connected with the hireability transition counselor. Again, in Vermont, transition counselors are working solely on transition issues. Hireability and DBVI can provide adult services, but in hireability, their transition staff do nothing but transition. And they help stay with the individual until they transition to adult services if that's appropriate. Next slide, please. So let's look again at the comparison between pre-employment transition services and vocational rehabilitation services. So in pre-ETS, there's job exploration counseling, work readiness training, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary education and transition programs, self-advocacy, and mentoring. On the other hand, hireability services look at job counseling and development, soft skills training. That's getting to work on time, wearing the appropriate clothes, how to do an interview, how to deal with conflict in the workplace. Those are skills that many people acquire just as they age and progress through school. Folks with disabilities don't always leave school with these kinds of skills. One of the neat things about hireability is that it allows for people to engage in job shadows. So they would go to an area of a trade perhaps that they're interested in, and they would be able to spend some time watching a person who's in that trade do their job and get a better idea about what that job entails. The other option is trial work experiences. In this particular situation, people will work with an employer for a number of weeks, and right now they get financial assistance from hireability while they're doing that. And so they actually get to try out a job. And sometimes as a result of doing that, the person with a disability actually gets hired in that particular job. Then there's post-secondary education. If somebody wants to be a social worker and they need books and supplies in order to participate in a class, then hireability would help with that. The hireability is basically the payer of last resort when it comes to education, particularly tuition. There's an expectation in the WIOA that individuals will go out and look for comparable resources. If there's another resource, such as a VSAT grant, that will help pay the tuition, then hireability is not going to pay for that tuition. But they will provide for assistive technology and other supports that the individual might need in order to participate in that class. Hireability also looks at various training programs, whether it's an apprenticeship, an internship, or enrolling in a vocational trade school like at one of our tech centers. Again, where there's funding available from another source, hireability does not pay for tuition. However, they will pay for instance, a computer that somebody might need for a computer class that they're taking. They will make referrals to independent living support programs, such as the Vermont Center for Independent Living. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about how CAP can help after high school, which is where I see most individuals. So if you're an individual with a disability and you're applying for or receiving services from an agency or program under the WIOA, we can help. We can help you with paperwork. We can explain the process. We can help someone, navigate and communicate with with an entity that you're applying or receiving services for. We can also provide information to anyone interested in knowing more about their rights and the various processes. We can listen, and that's important, to concerns anyone has about an agency or a person with a disability. But as I said earlier, CAP cannot talk about a person with a disability without their express permission. That is key, that they are the people that we are there to serve. Next slide, please. So when can we get involved? CAP can get involved at any stage of the process, and I think I've said that several times so far in this webinar. So we can help with applications, decisions regarding eligibility, decisions regarding employment goals, decisions about what services and supports will be provided to help the individual reach their employment goal. And we can help address conflicts between the person with disability and staff or the agency itself. And we can help when there's a disagreement with decisions made by the agency or program. In Vermont, I think we are fortunate in that we have been able to resolve most problems by participating in meetings, kind of being a go-between in terms of communication. Sometimes it means changing counselors, which is something that can happen. Sometimes it's a matter of providing more information about why the person wants a particular goal. There's any number of issues that can come up, and we're basically there to help people, understand what services are available and how they best can access those services. Next slide, please. So I want to make sure everyone knows how to reach us. CAP is part of the Vermont Legal Aid system, and so we have one intake number that comes in for the entire legal aid program, and that's there on your screen, the 800-889-2047. Or you can go to the Vermont Legal Aid website, and the link is there, vtlawhelp.org. And you could also visit a legal aid office in the area where you live. On that last point, I would want people to know that not all offices, since COVID, not all offices are open every day, all day to the public. So before you go to a local legal aid office, it'd be important to check to see when they are open to the public. And I also want to give you a little bit of a plug more about the Vermont Legal Aid website. Whether it's transition or CAP services, there is a wealth of information on that vtlawhelp.org website. I encourage everyone to take a look to see what the information is there, whatever the problem is, whether it's housing or guardianship or discrimination or public benefits, abuse, neglect, and exploitation, victims of crime. There's resource information on any number of topics on the Law Help website. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation for you folks. I appreciate you joining me, and I'm open to answering any questions that folks may have.
Okay, thank you, Sherrie, for sharing all of that information. Before we get to questions, and I see a couple in the chat, and we've also received some prior to the presentation, we are going to take a short pause to ask you to complete the evaluation for this workshop so we can make improvements and also fulfill our grant requirements. Please see the link in the chat and take a minute now to complete that. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and any of you, you are welcome to unmute yourself and turn on your camera and ask a question directly as well. But I will go ahead and ask the questions that I see. So there's a question about at what age or grade level do pre-ed services happen?
Pre-employment transition services can start at age 14.
Okay. How might CAP be involved in the pre-eds? You had mentioned that most of your services do seem to happen after school. So how might CAP be involved in pre-ed since that is optional for students to participate?
Well, as I indicated in the slide, we can provide information about what's supposed to be happening with pre-eds. We can help problem solve. I worked with a family at one point where the pre-employment transition services counselor from Higher Ability wasn't available, and they didn't have someone in the position at the time. So I was able to speak with the person who heads up that program at Higher Ability, and that individual, Cara Haynes, was able to help me get this family connected to a transition counselor, and the outcome was positive. I'm hearing that there have been concerns about transition counselors not attending IEP meetings. If that is happening, I'm happy to speak with the parents and try to get people connected with a transition counselor so that they can attend IEP meetings for students.
Yeah, I just got a message that my internet usage is unstable. That's why I've turned off my camera. So apologies for that, Sherrie. I
Okay.
see that you kind of have a black screen, but I exited the
Not a
workshop a
problem.
few minutes ago because of that. So, one of the questions we received before, who can help parents with services that are available and getting signed up for them? Also, who can assist in getting guardianship?
Could you repeat the first part of the question, Karen?
Is who can help parents with services that are available and getting signed up for them? And also who can assist in getting guardianship?
Yeah. The last slide that you will get has a list of resources that for developmental service providers, mental health providers. There's a great organization, Green Mountain Self Advocates, that would be helpful. And I think that that's a place to start if you are applying for a service and are getting denied a service based on eligibility. Then that is something that you can contact the Disability Law Project about. You would call that intake number, and we would look at it to see if there is a basis for challenging a denial and potentially represent the individual in that appellate process. And the second part of the question was?
Who can assist with getting guardianship?
You can find information about guardianship on the VT Law Help website. We do not provide advice to parents about guardianship because we represent the individual who would be the subject of the guardianship. So there are probate courts around the state, and you can contact your local probate court, and they can give you information about the various types of guardianship and what you need to do to file for guardianship. I would encourage any family that's considering guardianship to also consider a new option that's available called supported decision making. It's a way of developing an agreement between the individual with a disability and resources that they have available to them, whether it's family or service providers, so that guardianship, which is a restrictive process, is not always necessary, and it can be much more supportive and yet still make sure that there's somebody on hand to help the individual, navigate the adult world and the adult systems.
Okay,
There's,
thank you.
there's information on the Vermont Law Help website about supported decision making as well. And I think the Agency of Education may have some. Do you, Karen, have information
Yes,
about support? Yes.
yes, we also have some information, and we do have a taped workshop available on our website about what it is. So yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of information out about supported decision making. So, if another question, what are the pathways for young adults to live independently if they are unwilling and unable to secure employment?
Well, one of the options would be, if the individual is not already receiving SSI, supplemental security income benefits, as a person with a disability, as a youth, then they could apply for adult disability benefits. If they have no work history, it would be SSI. For those of us who have a work history, it's SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. SSI is an income-based eligibility in addition to a disability-based. So you need to be able to, use that income for food, clothing, and shelter. And some people who are on SSI can work on a limited basis. If you get to the point where you're able to work and maintain self-sufficiency, then you would no longer be eligible for SSI. But the Vermont VABER is also an organization that has helped people apply for those benefits. The Vermont Center for Independent Living might be able to help. Green Mountain Self Advocates might be able to help. The developmental services designated agencies may be able to help with some of that. And then, if you're looking for independent living kinds of things, again, I would focus on reaching out to Green Mountain Self Advocates and the Vermont Center for Independent Living as two key resources in that situation. And just a word, hireability in the WIOA don't contemplate that people can't work. The belief is that everyone can do some kind of work. That can be challenging to figure out what that is sometimes, but the concept is that everyone with a disability can do some kind of work if that's what they want. Some people do not, and that we have to respect.
Okay, so I have another question. A family ran into an issue with what was at the time voc rehab, now hireability, telling them that the parent was responsible for paying for a driver rehab service that the adult child with a disability. The family felt the resources of the parents shouldn't be an issue, as this was an adult with a disability, although they did live with their parents. Is this an issue CAP might have been able to help with? If so, what might CAP have done?
It is an issue that we may be able to help with. It would depend upon what kind of program it is and whether that program is necessary for the individual to achieve an employment outcome or an employment goal. One of the great things about the WIOA is that the focus is not just on getting someone a job, any job, and having them hold it for 90 days, which is the way the law used to be. The focus of the WIOA is to focus on helping people get credentials so that they can get good paying jobs and they can advance along career pathways. For instance, someone who might start out as a licensed nursing assistant, move on to become a licensed practical nurse, move on to become an RN. And in the field of nursing, you can go on even further than that. So the focus of the WIOA is on career pathways and not just getting someone a job. But as to this particular issue, if it's still an issue, please don't hesitate to give us a call. we'd be happy to take a look at it and see what we can do to help, either, support the individual's request for the rehab program. One of the things to keep in mind is if an individual with a disability is receiving Social Security benefits of any kind, they cannot be asked to contribute to the cost of their services. They cannot be asked to include, and this includes post-secondary education. They cannot be required to get a student loan. So there are a lot of factors that come into play. And so if you have an individual question or concern, please give us a call at the 800 number. And I would be happy to speak with you and to take a look at the situation to see what, if anything, we can do to help. I'm not sure that, family resources is going to factor into this, but I would need to see more information to give you a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you. Have there been discussions about high ability expanding to support students with higher support needs, like more severe autism or intellectual disabilities, etc.? We find that it usually falls to developmental services, but it's inconsistent for a lot of reasons. If this isn't something that isn't happening for an individual, is that something CAP can help with?
If they're not getting access to support services, that is more an issue that the Disability Law Project, in which we are housed, would address. Generally speaking, the services for individuals with intellectual disabilities and also people who are on the autism spectrum, those are generally provided through the designated and special service agencies. The last slide of the PowerPoint, which we didn't look at, is a list of resources that I think you will find helpful. But again, if you've got any question along any of these lines, don't hesitate to give us a call. We will at least give you some information and referral where we can't necessarily represent individuals due to staffing or our case acceptance priorities.
Okay, so I guess we missed the last slide. Is that what happened?
Yeah,
Sherrie?
yeah, you did. That's okay.
Okay, but everyone who has registered will receive the complete PDF, so you will actually all see that last slide, even if you didn't see it today.
Yes.
Yes, great.
I think I had the slides in the wrong order there, so we'll fix that so you have it going out.
So yes, that last question in the chat, we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint, including, yes, the slide with the resources that Sherrie has mentioned. Yeah. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Again, folks are welcome to turn on your camera or not, but to ask a question live or to type it in the chat and I can read it out.
Okay. So I think my final comment to everyone is, if you have a question and you're not sure whether we can help or not, please call. We are happy to talk with you and get you at least some direction. There's no question that you can't call about. We will give you some sort of response, whether we can help you directly or refer you to someone else or provide you with some written information. Whatever help we can provide, we will do that. Also, it's important to note that if you call that 800 number, you will not get a live person. That is not a monitored line. You will get a phone call back within several days. And if the intake has been really high, it may be a little bit longer than that. It's a problem that we've been dealing with. And so I also would encourage people to use that online link. Sometimes people say they get through faster that way. So when in doubt, give us a call. We're happy to answer any questions that we can answer.
So thank you, Sherrie, for being with us today. There are some thank yous in the chat. It was a lot of useful information. So for everyone, we have more interesting workshops coming up. We have one coming up on adverse effect and another one on dispute resolution that will be done by the Disability Law Project within the next month or so. You can find details about our upcoming workshops on our website, vermontfamilynetwork.org, along with the links to the previously recorded ones. We have tons of information on our website. Getting connected with us is easy. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or join our closed Facebook page if you are a parent. You can also sign up for our monthly e-news or check out our YouTube channel. We're here to help, so please contact us by phone or email. So thank you, everyone, again, and have a great day.